Good evening, everyone. My name is Hank Shocklee, and I'm for Shocklee Entertainment. It's the Ableton Users Group, the Advanced Users Group. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben Casey, and Ben Casey is going to talk to you a little bit about what he's doing, and we're going to start the show.
Hey, thank you guys, all of you, for coming out. There's a lot of really cool stuff that people are going to show off tonight. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about sampling. I personally really enjoy sampling. I find that when I start using recorded audio instead of synthesized sound, I catch all these weird little nuanced emotions in the audio that are a lot of fun for me. So years ago when I was in school, I played with Max MSP a little bit, and when I heard that Ableton was working with cycling to release Max for Live, I got really excited, and I thought, well, let's see what I can build with Max for Live. I'm a terrible programmer. I can't manage to program anything at all, and there are some people tonight that are going to show off some stuff with Max for Live that's really amazing. But I thought it would be interesting to show off what somebody that's actually terrible at math and horrible at programming can do with something like Max for Live. So I was, years and years ago, I started building this Max patch before Ableton had even been released. This was like 2000, 1999. And I started trying to build this thing. I'd been listening to Radio Boy, all of these artists that were basically like sampling audio live on the spot and making music out of it. And I started trying to build a patch to do that, and then Live came along and it got me distracted. I got involved in live looping and using Ableton itself as a live recording tool, and my own patch kind of fell by the wayside. So I tried to resume it, or I guess exhume it, when Max for Live came along, and it occurred to me that a lot of what I'd been trying to build years ago, I didn't need to reinvent again. Like, Ableton was an awesome sampler, and it was an awesome sequencer, and it did all this stuff, and I kind of was scratching my head as to what I could add to it. And it occurred to me that it might be really fun if I took the normal sample-based music workflow and I reversed it. I feel like people normally, when they're working with a sampler, they sit down, they find some audio they want, they record it, they cut it up, and then they sequence it. And I thought, well, what if I go the other way around, and I sit down and I sequence a bunch of audio before I've even recorded it? And then I go record audio that I want and cut it up. But what if I start sequencing first? So I built a really, really simple Max patch that just allows me to take audio, any audio signal coming into Live, and record it into a little buffer. And I can trigger the recording from a MIDI note. So I can send this patch MIDI anytime I want, and it'll just start to record whatever audio I'm playing. And then with another MIDI note, I can tell it to play that back again. So it's a pretty normal sampler, except I thought, well, what if I start sequencing and then fill it? What if I create some of like the classic dance music patterns and see what happens when I put, I don't know, Australian yodeling through it and see what I come up with. So this is probably the simplest live set I've ever used for anything. And what I have is I have one audio track here with a couple of different songs, and these are full songs. I've got some classic acid house and some mode selector and a Panda Bear tune and a few different things. And then here I've got an effects rack, and my effects rack has my Max for Live patch on it here. So I actually have 4 versions of it set up, and all 4 are exactly the same. When I had originally been programming this, I was like, hey, I'll make this cool like 8-track sampling thing, and then I realized the way Max for Live works in Ableton is so modular, if I just build one, I can copy it as many times as I want. So I just made one little sampling device, but I can have 4, or I can have 8, or I can have 64. It just depends on what my computer can handle. So in this particular example, I've got 4. So I used this along with the APC40, and I found this other really cool Max patch online that I did not write. That is this APC40 step sequencer. And it's pretty simple. All it does is it takes a MIDI clip here, and it lets you use the APC40 to put notes in the MIDI clip. So if I say select this MIDI clip and put some dots here on my APC40, we see some MIDI notes appear. So let's program something really, really very straightforward. Let's like pick a track for the kick drum, and we'll put like a kick drum on 1 and 3, And we can pick a track for the snare drum, and we'll put the snare drum on 2 and 4. And let's make like a, I don't know, what's a really boring hi-hat part? Let's try this for the hi-hat part. So this is a really pretty straightforward rhythm. So now I can switch over to these 4 other tracks that I have here that allow me to sequence the same way I just sequenced those hits. If I press a button here, it creates a MIDI note. The difference is, what these MIDI notes actually do is they're telling my max patch to start recording. So I can control when it starts to record the audio that we're listening to. So in this particular example, I got this mode selector song. And so this is what the song sounds like normally. And if I want, I can crossfade it out so you don't hear it. So let's just start with my kick drum pattern here, which is this first sampler, and let me make sure it's empty so nobody thinks I'm cheating. Yeah, we're good. Perfect. So anytime I want, on my main track, I can put in a MIDI note and start to record what we're hearing. So if I crossfade the original track out, we should get to hear. So let's make that shorter. I'm just going to reduce the decay time. So now I get to have the fun where I build the track live here by deciding when I want to record. So if I want to start recording from this point, I catch a nice little kick drum sound. And if I go to my next track, I got to try and find the snare. So let's see if I can find a hi-hat for my next track. That gets crazy fast. So then it occurred to me, I don't have to just catch the sound once and reuse it. I can actually have this thing constantly fill this buffer. So if I want, I could go put a totally different song on. So let's put on something that has like no beats at all in it in the background. And this is what that track sounds like. So let's take a whole new track here and let's do some MIDI sequencing. Let's see, we'll put some there. And we'll put some there, and let's tell it to record. Ooh. So there's no effects yet. This is dry. So I thought, what happens if instead of using something really chord-filled, I decided to try to use something dirty? And then you can just create madness and turn it all on at once. Okay, cool. So we don't have a lot more time for me. But if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you, guys. So next up, we have Mr. Nick Shelestak from Exit Music.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Nick Shelestak, and I play in the band Exit Music. So I'm going to talk about what it's like using a computer with more people on stage, because it's certainly a lot different than doing a solo electronics thing, which I also do. So I've learned a heck of a lot from touring in the last year of what it means to play with other live musicians and what you need to make that work. Oops, can we check that? So I use Live, and unlike Ben's simple set, I've got about, I think I'm up to 150 tracks in my set. There's a lot of backing tracks. Like, it's a 4-piece band, 2 guitars, drummer, and then I'm doing various keys, electronic stuff, playing backing tracks and whatnot. I try and be more of the musician on stage. Like, I keep the laptop off to the side. Like, my setup really is a lot better than this. I play outboard. I got a Prophet. I usually use a 61-key MIDI controller because I've got about 15 soft synths I'll play, and I want to be able to be a part of the band and not be a DJ. So the stuff I use to do that, iPads have become super important in setting up. Because there's more instruments, like sound check is super important to get my sounds to sound more like a band and not like a computer. So I will send all my tracks, like bass, drums, everything's gonna go out to its own channel as if those instruments were on stage. So that way the sound person can mix us and not, it's not my responsibility to, because I can't hear it, I'm on stage, so I need a sound person. So during sound check, I can actually still walk out and using, wireless, be able to play and listen, and they can help EQ the set, because in the number of venues, from small clubs to larger theaters, you never know what it's going to sound like. So I use a lemur when I'm controlling the whole set. I started using a lemur back when it was the actual hardware version, which was much more expensive. And now that it's only $50 for an iPad, I think it's probably the best device available for live musicians. Because I've got almost 150 tracks, to make sense of this live, by being able to design an interface that is almost bizarrely simple compared to what's going on. I don't need to look at this. When I need to start a song, I can actually just make a button that's got the name of it. Because when I'm on stage, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I need to be able to just hit a button, and then I can mix all the other various parts while I can be, playing my other instruments, and I don't need to see. So for one song, say I've got 2 synths I'm playing, I don't need to ever look at the computer. I can okay, I've got my piano and a pad that I'm playing. I don't even have to look, and I've got all my synths. That is easily the most useful device. So the other stuff I control with the iPad, I've got effects that the vocals go through that I can control from here. Again, starting and stopping songs, being able to disable certain instruments. Sometimes I will choose to do something different on a song. I've got an option to do electronic drums, synths, and depending on that makes it more fun for me. I can just decide to turn on something that's already tracked and then be able to play a different variation. That way it's not just playing back tracks. Even though there's so much going on, that lets me have more of a fun, I'm not playing guitar or something, so I can't just decide to change it to a different inversion, but I can then perform something different. And by having all those different instruments available to me and to quickly see, not trying to remember which button does what, it's like I can turn the piano on and whatever. It's crazy simple for something that's going on that's so complex. And sometimes I want to talk about what can happen when there's a problem with the computer on stage, because it's kind of like a motorcycle. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when. Like I've had some pretty epic crashes, full-on kernel panic, where they get the gray screen and you have to turn it off, and some machine gun noise where I have to rip the cables out of the audio interface to be able to stop the chaos. So when that stuff happens, I don't have the leisure to restart, so we need backups, and it's kind of like your backup for your hard drive, except I need it to work in about 3 seconds. I can't let me get another hard drive. So doing things like I've got a stereo split mix of things on an iPod, because my drummer needs to still get click, which I send out from. I've got a multi-out interface with headphones, so I can send. I've got drum buses for each song, so he can get exactly what he wants from what's playing. I simply use a sends to output just the headphones that he gets. Well, if this dies, I can't just keep playing songs because he's not going to be able to hear what's going on. I can't start over, from something, and he's like, "When's it going to start?" I can't just have audio come out. So things like having a mono version, so drum track going to one headphone and then splitting that signal. So I've got mono versions of songs going to an extra DI. Stuff like that I never thought about until, my computer's dead on stage. I don't have a setup. Unfortunately, there was about a 500 capacity show at South by Southwest this year that's exactly what happened. And when you're playing at festivals and stuff and you've got 30 minutes total and 10 to set up, 10 to tear down, you can't set up second computer and second interface. So it gets so much of this needs to work perfectly all the time. I don't have the option to get for things to go down. So a lot of this is kind of redundancy, because it's just super important. In the studio, I've got stuff that crashes. You just restart. Who cares? But you get a little disc read error on stage with guitars playing. As soon as that audio hiccups for a second, everything gets weird. So the smallest little problem, it becomes magnified much more. But let me just show you what. I guess I don't have everything here, but it's more about what it's like playing this stuff live. So what I'm able to do, like I said, for each song, I simply make a track, and everything is split. I'll turn this down a little bit. I've got everything split up into the various instruments, and everything is. Start first one here. Because it's a band, and it's not like I'm just playing a track back, for rehearsals and whatnot, we want to play the verse, the chorus. I have to have all the songs split up into the different parts, and I play everything back. I chop it up and use follow actions, which I'm assuming a lot of people know if it's advanced. By playing a clip, I can specify what duration it's going to play, and it'll go on to the next ones. But what I can do is also then just play from, okay, let's just start over from the chorus. I have a rehearsal set that I can go into wherever part of the song, which is when you're playing with everybody, hold on, let's start over. I can't just all right, let's go from the beginning again. Everything is split up. And for each song, needing effects and my other instruments to be in time, the same tempo, I send out MIDI to my Prophet, and I've got a Chaos pad with delays on it. I want those things to be in time. What's great about live is each scene, you can tell it what BPM and time signature to play those clips back. And just by launching it, it does that. I don't have to think, let me change my tempo, what key, if I'm in, some songs are in 3/4, 6/8. I can just, by putting that into the scene name and hitting play, if you look at the tempo and time signature up in the left, it automatically changes, it's 111. So, and that information being sent to other instruments make everything work, totally in sync, and I don't have to think about it, because DJing and whatnot, yeah, I'll change tempos to be up a bit faster, but with the band, I can't do that. So that's how each of the songs get played. What else is great about live is we've also had, when we're playing for 3 months in a row, things break and get lost. We left a laptop in a Mexican restaurant about 300 miles before our next gigs. When we got there, the other keyboard player who uses Mainstage and those synths was kind of SOL. We had an hour and a half before we went on. I have made other synths that sound like hers, and I just have them saved on empty tracks. So if something goes wrong with her stuff, I've got an extra MIDI keyboard just plugged in. I can quickly just fire those things up, and she's got a new set to play, and vice versa. If my set crashes, we've got things loaded up on her computer, because that stuff happens. We've had DX7 have our keys break right off, but with some, with Operator and FM8, I can make patches that are almost exactly the same. So being able to save ourselves that's how I use live. I guess there's any questions about? Yeah. No, that's cool.
But what buffer do you run at with all this stuff?
What's fantastic? Okay, I'm using the RME Fireface UFX, and I've got it set at 128, and I've got no problems. I mean, you guys know the test, just the run the CPU. It's probably gonna be allowed. Let me turn that sound down. So, this is the test that you can figure out whether or not your buffer is set too low. You'll get audio pops by just turning this on. So yeah, at 128, it's no problem. I'll turn it off. Let me take it down to 64. I think it has to reload samples and all that stuff. It's probably better to do it in an empty set, but let's see if it doesn't take too long. Still fine at 60. I can bump up the CPU. So the importance of a really good interface is those drivers. I mean, I've used some other companies. I mean, 256, you start to get the crackly feedback. Like, let me take this thing down to 28 samples. Yeah, that's important. Latency. I mean, I'm playing. Like I said, about 15 soft synths. I've got Contact. I've got a whole bunch of Native Instruments stuff, and playing back samples. It's amazing. With all that other stuff playing, that's the importance of a good interface with good drivers, is being able to. So there we go. I'm at 28 samples, and you can hear the crackling. So that's how you can test what your interface can take. If no one's tried that, I mean, that for me was a mystery for a long time. I didn't know what the point of. Great, I'm listening to a A440. What's that? Why would I do that? And so you can jack up your CPU usage and see what your audio interface can take. So that's how you can get the most out of your gear, and then know if you need to upgrade. Any other questions? Nothing? Yeah?
What are you using to switch your presets on your synths?
I've got a lot of synths loaded up. One of the things with turning on and off synths is I make sure to do all that. If you've used VST synths, whatever, if you got audio playing, you turn them on and off. Sometimes a lot of them will make an audible click sound. I can't have that happen when I'm playing on stage, so I make sure to turn everything on and off in between songs. Still, sometimes if you forget, it's going to happen. Like if you forget one thing, you're going to get a problem. So I've got a lot of things that are in Contact. What I do is I switch the MIDI channels. I don't switch turning on and off a synth. I've got all of these. If you guys can see all these tracks here with the green and blue are MIDI. So all the input comes from my MIDI controller, and I simply enable the input of that MIDI, which will go to the soft synths. So soft synths are always on. but it's whether or not I'm sending MIDI input to them. So I can turn on and off all the synths. But they stay on, so there's not any audio glitching when I turn things on and off. It's important, I know a lot of other people use live, if you've got soft synths, turn them all on and off before you start playing. So that's part of my routine when I get on is, these are just the MIDI tracks, and these are the synths to be turned on and off. I just go through, turn everything on, so it's just been loaded, and I almost have no problems. So this is an example of, I've got backing vocals, and for some of the songs, I'll control things like the vocal effects, the vocal delay that happens at the end of breaks and whatnot, so I can determine how long something's going to go on for. So for something like this, I'm playing keys. What I'll do is I'll switch to, I'll just change synths in the middle of, like for the verse. I can change everything I do. You guys get the gist of what's going on. Live, yeah. So live, everything's here. When I edit everything, I do all the editing. I take this starts off as one long, and then I take it over here. I chop everything up into what sections I need, drag everything over. Yeah, then everything comes back here and gets to be automated. That way, like I said, I can start us from wherever, but it's still going to play sequentially as if it's one long thing. But I don't have to worry about making sure that it starts. Because yeah, with the band, if anything goes wrong, they're all going somewhere else. I can't, when I'm DJing, if I got, extra 4 bars, no big deal. I just can do it. You've got 3 people relying on you to make sure it's perfect. So everything's got to be set up to work in order. Yeah?
When you hit the last scene of a song, how does it end?
The last scene, those just play out and to the end. So those don't have any follow actions on them because nothing's warped.
Do they fade out, or do you turn it off? How does it end? How does the song end?
Yeah, a song will end because the guitar player is doing a lot of stuff where lots of delays and things. So the other instrumentation is what generally will take a song out. It's not really things start before and end because I'll send a couple of bars. A click goes to the drummer who can actually start the band. The other musicians don't have to play with a click. It's not annoying. Just the drummer, so they can all still play in a more. Yeah, so then that's where the feel. We're playing. When they're ready, I can then just start another track. Whatever our set list is. Yeah. Each row here of like one color. This is all one part of a song, and down here, oops, my screen is off. So in the launch box down here in your clip, this is your follow action. So any clip you can tell at what beat division, be it you got bars, and beats. After a certain amount of time from hitting play, what is it you want the clip to do? All these drop downs, you can either, whenever you put a clip in there, there's no action. It'll just play, and if it's looped, that's fine. Or it'll stop. So if you've got, this clip here is, after 2 bars, it goes and plays the next clip, because I set that up with the down arrow here, which is play next. You can have it play random. What's fun to do with a lot of drum beats and whatnot is to have like a whole bunch of 1 bar or 4 bar, whatever, but then select all of them and like say play after 1 bar a random clip, and that'll give you something to write over. You'll get a different drum beat. That's a really fun thing to do for drums, bass lines and stuff, to have randomness. But this lets me make sure that something's going to play every time, like using a launch pad or something. If I forgot to hit the next scene on my own, not going to work. So everything's follow actions to play at an exact amount of time. Right then? All right, that's it for time, guys. One question? I have a couple of banks of different. I've got no sound here. Oh, my audio has stopped. I have drums. I play drums for some songs. I've got 3 banks for the songs that I'll do, along with the drummer who's doing acoustic stuff. I do the electronic stuff. So that's how. Yeah. I play various drums. All right, guys, that's it for time. Thank you very much.
One of the things that I wanted to do was I always want to have like a community, and I think that the thing that's missing in New York City right now is that community. When I started making hip hop back in the late '80s, there was a community that we used to have, where people would come together and share ideas and talk about music. And those sharing of ideas lead to other creative events. And so the idea of us putting on the Ableton's Meetup is basically for us to meet each other, but at the same time, us to be able to start the collaborating process with each other. So that's why you want to meet people, you want to converse, because everybody has different skills and different levels of skills. And some people have areas of expertise that's different from the expertise that you have. So the idea is for us to come together as one community and build. And what better place is there to be inside of Tekserve? All right? So, are you guys ready? Not ready? So, I found out about Tekserve. How did you anybody find out about Tekserve? How did you find out about Tekserve? My computer broke. Right? Is that the way it works? My computer broke, and I just went, and these guys fixed it for me. And if they couldn't fix it, they'll tell you, hey, man, this is just not work. You just got to buy another one. But this has been the most reliable place, and I've been coming here since 2002. Yeah, I think it was 2002. And this is my first time deciding to put on an event in here. So this is a thrill for me. Once again, this is a place for creative people. All the staff here are all creators. They're all, everybody from top to bottom. Everybody this is a creative store. One of the only creative stores in New York City like this. So I want to thank Paul and all the staff at Tekserve for letting us come through here and do this. And are we ready? Okay. Once again, I want to introduce you to Brian Jackson, everybody.
Hey, so thanks everyone for coming. I'm one of the co-owners of Devotion Gallery in Brooklyn. We're an Ableton certified training center, and Hank and I actually started doing these in Brooklyn, but we got a tiny little space, and streaming it over the internet was a problem. So I'm glad he came up with this solution. We get a lot more of you in here, and then hopefully the streaming is working better than we had in the past. So We offer classes on Ableton Live and a whole bunch of other stuff. That's our website. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. And I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about Ableton's compressor device. So what I figured I was going to do, I saw people had all these really cool Macs for Live demonstrations planned, iPad stuff. And so I just wanted to show you something based on one device in Live that everybody has. And it's on a topic that seems to be very popular now and still very mysterious to a lot of people, compression. Right? So compression's been around for almost 100 years, and a lot of people still really have a hard time with it. So I wanted to show two particular uses of it, primarily bus compression, so like on a whole drum set, and then also on the mix bus, on the master out, which would primarily be a mastering kind of usage, but there are people that use it either way. So I'm going to focus really on just this one device. All I'm going to talk about is Live's compressor. So basically what I have here is just some drums, nothing too fancy. Let me get rid of all the reverb and delay. And so what I wanted to do is show you how you can use Live's compressor to just fatten up a simple drum loop. So let's zoom in here. So basically what we're looking at is I created a rack that has two different compressors in it and one just pass through. So you can do a little bit of compression or you can squash it and mix it in with an uncompressed version. And so I'm going to show you a couple of those different variations, and also want to talk a little bit about these different settings in here, especially the feed forward 1, feed forward 2, and feedback. And then over here on the left where it says envelope. So really quickly, the models here, feed forward 1 and feed forward 2, are just based on Live's old compressor 1 and compressor 2. So the first version of Live just had something called compressor. It's not smooth. It's not meant to be like a mastering compressor. It's really for sound design. So feed forward 1 would be for stuff where you want a more exaggerated compression sound. Let me go ahead and just... So now we're hearing just the feed forward 1 here. And this would be switching to feed forward 2. So you see there's way less compression just by switching between those. So these are really important settings. And also here, the way it detects the signal. And my favorite's actually the opto, and I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and play for you just the dry one. So this is the uncompressed. There's no compression on that right now. And that's this guy here with a little bit on it, so let's compress a little bit more. And let's hear it without anything. So that would be just no compression. And you should notice it just gets fuller. I'm not trying to totally overdo it right now. Now, let's say I did want to overdo it. So now I'm using the feed forward 1, and this is a really aggressive, non-clean style of compression. So this is popular, especially in certain styles of like metal and hip hop, where they want the drums to be really big. They will go ahead and squash the drums and then mix in an uncompressed version of it. So this is what you maybe heard is called parallel compression. So in that case, I'd also mix it in some of the dry. So now I can mix the two here. Let's go ahead and bring this up a little bit. And one of the important things when you're working with compression is you want the volume to be the same when it's on and when it's off. Very commonly, people think the compressor is making something sound better because it gets louder. So you notice as I'm turning it on or off here, I'm actually trying to match the gain so I can hear what the compressor is actually doing. So that's with it off. You should just notice it just feels like a little punchier. Can people hear that in here? Cool. So that's one use of it. That would be if I just wanted to hear it just on my drums. Let me bring the whole mix in here now. So now that I have different sounds in here, if I want to think about doing this on the mix bus, I have to be worried about things like when the kick hits, hearing the synth part get pushed down, because we don't want that to happen. I'm not talking about the dance music ducking kind of effect that's popular. So this is a master bus now. I have a little bit of EQ, teeny bit of limiting, not meant to be really bringing the gain up. So this is just on the mix bus, and the idea here, let me zoom in on this. Oops. You'll notice I have the feedback model selected, and then optical. So let me talk about that for a sec. So feedback means that the output of the compressor is what it's using to actually detect the signal. So it's based on the old Fairchild and API style compressors. They don't do as much compression, and they're meant to be a little bit more musical and smoother is the idea. So for a mix bus, feedback is actually a really good idea. And then opto is based on optical, which means that the release is nonlinear. So it's going to release a little faster and then slower as the signal drops. It's based on the old optical circuits. So this will just kind of give you a different sound. And then here you'll also notice I have the sidechain EQ on. So you see if I open this up, I can just turn the EQ on, and this makes sure that the compressor is not triggered by the very low subfrequencies. So the compressor's not hearing that. I still hear it, but the compressor's not. So I'm going to mess with a couple of these parameters so you can hear just how turning these on or off can affect everything. So you see it's only filtering below 30 right now. You see as I bring it up, it's doing less and less compression. See the gain reduction over here? So it's not really doing the bass at all. And so let's hear it without this. So that's the whole mix without any of the stuff on the master bus. And that's with a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression. Like no limiting, just to stop the clipping. So that's without anything. And that's with everything on. So are there any questions on the, and really I'm just focusing on the compressor device today. Oh, okay, well that's, if I put it right on this sound right here, that already has a lot of tremolo on it. So actually, I am compressing the bass, but for this kind of a bass sound, I didn't want any ducking. So this would be the bass before I had anything on it. And I'm just using the optical. So you can see how the bass was set here, and this was played bass. So you can see I have the ratio at 8:1, which is not uncommon for electric bass. The attack is enough to let a little bit through the optical model. And then again, I don't want anything doing stuff to the frequencies below, or the compressor listening to frequencies below like 90. So that just tightens up the low frequencies a lot. This material here, I could do something that would make it sound more like duct, but there's already a lot of tremolo on the keys, so it might be, which is actually a guitar synth. It's Slayer. If anyone's used this. It's a synth that emulates a guitar. So that's what the key sound is. The synth sound is actually this guitar emulator here. But if I wanted to, I could go over here and say if I wanted like the kick or the snare to trigger this, just go over to Effects, Compressor, open this up here. Oops. And then I could turn on the sidechain setting in there and pick, say maybe the kick. Now you get when the kick hits, kind of pushes down the guitar part. And then the feed forward 1, higher ratio. So that could give them more of an aggressive kind of a feel, especially if the release is too fast. But there's already so much tremolo on this, it kind of doesn't make sense to do that. But that's the very kind of overused, popular sidechain ducking effect, more or less, right now. So I guess one of the things I was wondering if people had any questions about was how to pick the different models or envelope detection or the rack I set up. Any other questions about Live's compressor? 'Cause it's very flexible. Yeah.
How do you when you put a compressor on the master? How do you kind of do you have to tweak both to be?
Okay, so yeah, it's actually a really good question. So it's really important if you're going to put compression on the master for mixing that it's on the whole time. That you don't put a compressor on after you're done mixing, because then the mastering engineer is going to be really mad at you, because usually that means you didn't do it right. So mix bus compression is going to have settings that are a lot more subtle, for one. You see the ratio is like 2.7 something, and I'm looking for just a couple dB on the main out. So certain styles of music, it's really common to do it, especially if the large consoles often have a compressor built in. Especially SSL got famous for having these really nice compressors built into the console for the mix bus. When we try to do it in software, we're not using a $4,000 analog compressor, so it's easy to really not have it sound as musical. So you just have to pull back a lot on your settings when you're doing it on the main out. And have it on the whole time. So when you're mixing into it, things are going to react a little differently. So when you push up a snare drum, you might notice the whole thing coming down more. So it takes a little bit of practice. But for certain styles of music, it's really worth doing, and other ones, it's not. It kind of depends on how aggressive and punchy you want your stuff to sound and how good the compressor you have that you're doing it with. So, did that answer your question? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the envelopes here is how the compressor is detecting the signal. So a compressor actually always has the side chain on. The term side chaining is referred to a technique, but all compressors have a side chain, which is the signal that's split off from the input that goes to the detector, and then that tells it how to turn something down, the signal that we hear. So the envelope is how it's detecting and kind of how it's behaving. So peak means it's looking for faster, more instantaneous spikes. So let's say, let me go back over to the drums to demo that one here. And solo the drums. Let me do just the, do this one here. Sure I'm looking at the right one. So if I switch to peak, it's going to be looking more for the attacks right as they happen. If I go to average, it's going to be looking at a longer period of time to determine when it's crossed the threshold. So it'll act a little slower. So if you're using something as more of like a limiter, like for mixing on just a snare on vocals, you might want to have peak detection, because that's going to keep the peaks from going above where you want. RMS is going to be a little, smoother is not the right word, but basically means average. So it's usually over, depending on the time on the compressor, 200-300 milliseconds, 100 millisecond time. And then optical, being based on those circuits, is going to react quickly, and then the release is nonlinear. So like the LA2As, a lot of the Universal Audio stuff, that kind of, based on those kind of types of compressors. Optical is particularly good on vocals and bass, but you just play around with them and see which ones you like. And then if you play around with the different models here, you'll get also totally different results. So we have 9 different possibilities, just the 3x3 there for just how this compressor will behave. So a lot of the DAWs come with very flexible compressors. This is one of the most flexible I've seen that just kind of ships with a piece of software. So you can use it for all kinds of stuff. They kind of built everything in that you'd want in a compressor, except for a wet-dry knob, and that you can build yourself with a rack pretty easily. Yeah. That answer your question? Cool. So. I just have one more. Yeah. Look ahead. I always want to. So the idea there is that if it can, because it's digital and there's a buffer, it can look ahead to see what's coming down the pipe, and so it can react a little quicker and a little smoother. So you can actually get more compression and limiting with less artifacting, but it's more CPU. And then, of course, if you go to feedback, it can't look ahead because it's feeding back. So there's a joke in the manual that they're working on the time machine for the next version. If you look at the manual, that's what they say. They're not just being smartasses. It's because if it's feeding back, they can't look ahead because it's coming in from behind.
So the 1 millisecond means that it's looking at it what?
Yeah. So the audio before we hear it, it's actually detecting it a millisecond before we hear it. So it can kind of make guesses. So the further it looks ahead, in theory, the smoother the compression would be, but then also the higher your CPU load could be. But a couple of them might not be a big deal. You'll see that on the limiters too, right? Limiter also has a look ahead as well. For limiting, it's probably more important if you want something to sound less limited. But compressor is and a limiter are basically cousins. So yeah.
A look ahead, so I understand, it's only for a recorded track. You couldn't use it.
You can't use it. You could use it in real time, but you wouldn't hear that happening in real time because if things are, because it's going through the buffer. Oh no, it can't do it before you play it. But remember, it's going through a buffer before you hear it. So if you're direct monitoring, then it's useless, right? But if you're hearing it through their mixer played back, you'd have latency. But then you would be able to look ahead, but you wouldn't be able to play because it'd be like late, right? So yeah, their manual, by the way, the Ableton manual on their compressor is really good. Has anyone here looked at it or read it? A couple of you. I highly recommend it. It's more than just this knob does this knob does that. They actually have some techniques in there. It goes into all the parameters and kind of, not examples in everyone, but there's some good background on the different things I talked about. So if you've not spent a lot of time with this, you can use it for very extreme stuff as well. I showed you more of the subtle uses. But it's a very cool device that's often overlooked. Yeah.
Generally, for if you're producing like electronic music,
Uh-huh.
what would be the purpose of putting a compressor on the master track? Is that usually
The idea of compression on the mix bus is for a fattening kind of result, not for a peak limiting. So just to make things sound a little bit fuller, maybe glue the whole mix together a little bit so that sounds, especially when you're doing with electronic stuff that's all sample-based, the sounds, even with a good reverb, can seem kind of disparate. They don't glue together well, as opposed to like a recorded situation where there's a lot of mics in the same room. So that can also help with that. So between a good reverb and a little bit of compression, it can make it sound more like a coherent recording. Yeah. I like to have it off for the very reason I was saying that I like to be able to match when the compressor's on and when it's off so the volume is the same, so I can actually make a judgment as to whether I like what the compression's doing. If you just turn something up, your immediate reaction is going to be it sounds better. So when makeup is on, it's automatically going to jack the volume up. And you can go, oh yeah, compressor sounds awesome. And if you look, it might not be doing any gain reduction. It just made it louder. So if you leave that off, then you can kind of match the gains yourself and be sure that you like what the compression's doing. So a little trick, you'll notice here, every plugin in Live has this option of save as default preset. So I kind of have my own compressor preset default set up, so I just double click on it in the browser. It has kind of the most common things I use, and makeup is off on that. So it's always off whenever I grab it. I rarely use the preset, so I set my default up to be kind of like a happy medium. Compression is one of those things that presets aren't that useful for, except for maybe your default, for the most part. So, yeah. The makeup gain is based on the threshold position. So let me go ahead and just turn this off and hide this. And so, I have it on my desktop. I have it set up for off. So yeah, so let's say I have this on here, right? Notice it's just as I bring the threshold down, it's just bringing it up. So the idea there is that when you're compressing, you're often trying to make headroom so you can bring it up. That's like standard mix usage, like just on maybe a snare drum or on a guitar. But even then, you want to be sure that you like what the compression's doing, not just that it made it louder. Especially if I turn this ratio down here. See, that's not even really doing much if I do that. Just kind of tries to balance it out for you. Makes it harder for you to make decisions yourself. But, yeah. Yeah, so the threshold is the level at which the signal needs to go above before the compressor pushes back down, does gain reduction. So the knee actually determines how precisely at the threshold it starts compressing. So a knee of 0, hard knee, would be like limiting. It waits exactly till it gets to the threshold, and then it starts pushing back. But if you set it like 7 dB or 10 dB, it's going to slowly start adding compression as it reaches the threshold. So knee basically lets you choose how responsive or soft or hard the compression is as it does the gain reduction. So if I wanted something to be more like a, here I'll just crank this to to infinity, right? So the ratio is infinite to 1. That means it's a limiter. If I set the knee at 0, you can actually see here that the compression doesn't kick in until it gets right to that level. So if I set the knee softer, you see how I start getting a little bit of compression? If I set to 18 dB, it's now like going to start compressing that much lower than the threshold. So if you're trying to do it for like more of a limiting kind of thing, you want a hard knee. If you're doing it for different types of music or recordings, mix bus in particular, you'd want it a little softer. Or like a drum bus, that would depend on the style you're doing. Maybe you want it harder or softer. So, and again, all this is subjective, but there are certain things that you don't want to do in certain scenarios, but there's no right thing to do. There's some don'ts, but there's do's or whatever you want. Yeah. So is that enough on compression for everyone?
Thank you, Brian. Once again, if you guys really want to, find out more information, I suggest you to take a class with him at Devotion Learn. Great place to learn how to do all this stuff.
All right, so Adriano is going to be up here next, and he's going to show you some really cool iPad beat surfing.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for being here tonight. And first of all, I want to suggest you to probably change a little bit the layout here, because I will be screening my iPad here, and people that are back there are not going to be able to see. I don't know. It's up to you, so feel comfortable to sit on the floor if it's OK. And that's my Ableton Live view. OK, so I want to introduce a little bit this iPad app called Beat Surfing. It's pretty much like a unique app that has some unique feature for an iPad app, basically. So I'm interested in every kind of like iOS devices and use of iOS devices with Ableton Live and Reason and any kind of like audio software since iPod Touch came out. That was like 2007. I mean, I'm a Tekserve, so I probably, this is like the place in which a history about Apple is really intense. So probably it's like 2007 or 2006. And there was no app store. So the only way to install an app was like actually root your machine. So jailbreak, that is something that is not supposed to be done. And at the beginning, like the first app that I used was the father of the recent TouchOSC. Have you ever heard about this app for iPad or iPhone? It's called TouchOSC. It's super cool. It's something that allows you to design your own interface. It's similar to Lemur, the one that you saw before, or at least it was like used. The difference between this specific app that I'm showing you on this screen right now and all the other on the market is that it allows you to play in a way that is pretty unique. So taking advantage of the touch screen and so slide your finger on top, so kind of like a surfing thing. So first of all, like this kind of app can be used and you can interface this app with your computer in two ways. One is like take advantage of a Wi-Fi network, so what I'm doing right now. The other one, that is the one that I suggest you if you want to bring this kind of setup on stage, is like an hardwired connection. So you can use an I/O dock from Alesis or any kind of other dock that makes you take advantage of the MIDI built in, and so has a real cable that you can plug instead of like trust a Wi-Fi network that you never know what's going to happen, like now. So I'm connecting my iPad to a network I created on my machine called Adriano Clemente. That is actually my name. So
you're saying even if you make your own ad hoc network from your own computer, it's not trustable?
It's trustable, of course, because the network is not going to collapse. Things that can happen if you have a router or like any modem that can be unplugged or like electricity can go out and stuff. The problem, why? Oh, 1 second, I need to put the password here. Okay. So the difference is mainly in terms of delay and latency. So you will experience less latency with a hardwired connection versus a Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay, so before to go through like the specific of this app, I'm gonna just interact a little bit with this simple scene that is like a patch that I designed for with beat surfing, and is connected with Ableton, of course. So I'm gonna launch clips, and there are like a couple of drum rack here. Then we have a synth controlled and split on 3 different chain. So I'm gonna show you right now how that work. Okay, as you can see here right now in this directory little window on my network MIDI network setup, there is this Adriano Clemente's iPad. So it means that the computer knows that there is an iPad. Now I can connect with that, and okay, I'm able to play now. Okay, so you see that there is a little bit of delay between what's going on here. I want to show you a little bit what's going on because you don't see my hands, so you see just like things like color and blinking. So we have a drum pad here, and then some notes here, and I have a synthesizer that's controlled by these 3 little buttons that are triggering just simple notes. Then we have some samples organized on these faders, and clips here, another clip there. And these clips are set in a launch mode that is toggle, so I can use the same button to turn on and off a clip. So let's start with a hi-hat. Okay, this is like a simple stop. Okay, this is like a simple way to organize things in Ableton. Now it seems like, okay, what is doing? I want to show you what's going on in Ableton Live. Mainly, we have this track is called Synth. This is my synth controlled by this trigger, right? And you can see there are like 3 instruments. These are like 3 of them from the Korg Legacy collection. So Monopoly and Wave Station and another Wave Station. I triggered between them using a chain selector that is like this little orange guy there. You can see that if I zoom in. That is actually controlled by this fader that has just 3 states. So it's like first chain selector, number 0, 1, and 2. And this allows me to switch between 3 different instruments and use them with like just 3 simple buttons. So I have this one, or right? Since I know what is contained in this button, I try to create something that makes sense in terms of music. So I needed just 3 notes because it's a pretty simple harmonic. Oh my God, I'm so sorry about it. Plus, there is another thing. You see, there is another fader with just 3 states. This fader allows me to jump with, you can see here, there is a pitch MIDI effect. So what I said is like, hey, every time I hit this guy, bring everything plus 12 notes, so 12 semitones, so basically 1 octave, or stay in the central one or go down. That means also these. So with just like 3 simple buttons, I can have 3 instruments and I can play them in a way that is pretty interesting using 1 hand, or actually 2 fingers. I can do everything with 2. So this is a little part of this patch. Then we have something interesting that is like this fader. So what that fader does is actually control, trigger, and modulate something in a super simple and old device of Ableton that is the Simpler, that I love, because I think is one of the most powerful instruments built in the library of Ableton Live. I'm gonna show you what's going on. There is a track called Vocal, this one on the right, and this contains just 2 simple samples. These samples are triggered by this button here that has 2 states. As you can see, there is like 1 and 2. This button is also connected and routed with the fader. So the cool thing of beat surfing is that allows you to create some kind of like behaviors. They call it behaviors. So if I go to the edit window, you can understand better what I'm saying. If I touch the fader, right? I'm sorry, this trigger is saying to me, this trigger is related with the green one. This button, the blue one, is connected with the green circle and the yellow fader. And what's going on is that every time the fader is touched or the green circle is touched or triggered, they send a message to the blue one and say, hey, trigger the sample. So basically, you can create some kind of like relation between buttons, and you can just like touch 2 or 3 things and create a cascade of information. And this like completely without using Max or Max MSP, you can do directly these things from on your iPad. And the other cool feature of beat surfing is that all the editing about your scenes is made on the iPad, not on the computer. If you use Lemur, just Mutant Lemur for, his line right now, for iPad, or you use TouchOSC, you are stuck with the computer because you can design your patch here and then send it to the iPad. So it means every time you need to design the thing, send it to the iPad, test it, it doesn't work, go back to the computer. It's a little bit annoying, and it's something you cannot do when you travel or when you are in the park. So I think this is like one of the best things of beat surfing, like being on the train and like design a thing and think in your mind, okay, I want to apply this at home then to a sampler or a drum rack or whatever. You are advanced user probably, so you know what I'm saying. You have an idea and you want to sketch that. This can be really helpful. So the only limitation is that you don't have labels. So if you do something around and after 2 days you try to open the same patch and you didn't test it, it's probably you're not gonna remember anything because things are just like a lot of colors and objects. So what's going on with this trigger? You see that when I move the trigger up and down, the fader up and down, I basically control the start and the loop knob on my Simpler. And that happened for both sample. That are basically the same sample, just 2 different sections of it, so it seems that it's more complete, but it's basically the same sample. And that allows you to do something like this. So use a fader as a trigger, and at the same time use the fader as a trigger in combo with the fader, that is like this. Okay, the other cool thing is that what's the relation between the green button and the fader? That the green button is actually a collection of snare. You see that each circle has a little circle around it. tool, right? Each segment, it means a status that can be assigned to a different sample. So you can have one trigger and trigger with that, let's say, these are all different kicks. The difference of this is that every time I trigger this, there is a snare, but the sample as well. So I can decide sometimes to do this. I'm having some latency problem now. Just snare, kick, and snare, or by the way, just to show you a little bit, when you want to create something on beat surfing, that works pretty much like that. You say, add a new scene, you don't have anything, and you start to drag objects. So I want to have a circle button, I want to make it like bigger, I want to change the color of it, and I want to decide how many, the properties of that button. So you have directly here a collection of MIDI buttons that react in real time with Ableton. So while you are testing, you already can hear the sound and make sure that things are not overlapped, because sometimes you can be confused and put the same thing on C1, and then you're like, oh my God, I wanted the kick here, and there is a synth. The other cool stuff is that you have the possibility to select the channel from here. So you can use the same layout and have C1 to C2 16 times, because you have 16 MIDI channels, right? So you can split that in a pretty, sorry? Oh. Okay, this is happening because of the video on. And yeah, as you can see, my CPU is like going crazy. It's like 180%. So I'm not gonna continue before it explodes. But last little thing is you see these notes here. They are strictly related with these blue buttons. So I can hit one note from the green, and that is going to learn which is the right note that matches with each blue button. So like that. Okay. Thanks.
Amazing. I want to bring out our last presenter, which is Jace, DJ Rupture, and Bill Bowen.
Okay, so I guess I'll get up on stage. I'm just gonna, it's the last presentation, so we'll be pretty quick. But we're here talking about Sufi plugins, which are it's a lot of things, but it's basically a suite of 7 different plugins for Ableton Live. I should be behind these. Let me unwind this a bit. Yeah, it's 7 different plugins made for Ableton Live, made for Max for Live, and which you can download for free online. And with this project, I was really interested in working with and thinking about non-Western and more lyrical conceptions of sound and music. You know, I DJ all over the place, and I listen to a lot of music from all different spots of the world. And I lived for a while in Barcelona, and I was working a lot with a violinist, a Moroccan violinist named Abdel Hakrahal. And he was fantastic. And we would have these moments where I would be playing, say, a regular, for me, a regular 4/4 hip-hop beat, and then Abdel would be playing his violin, and he'd be like, wait, he'd have to pause and figure out where the downbeat was and how it would work. And I was like, this is really interesting. I'm using this software that defaults to 4/4, usually 120 BPM, and to him, that's just a completely alien structure. He's used to these more complicated Moroccan polyrhythms. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm coming up against this software limitation. And then we'd have other sessions where we'd be working on a track, and he would start playing in Arabic scales with quarter tone tunings and different types of tunings. And I was like, this is beautiful, but I don't have a synthesizer that's naturally tuned to this. So all of these whole process of building music, getting there in the studio with Abdel, made me start thinking about things I would like to have in my software in that toolbox. And that didn't happen until Max came out, and then Max came out inside of Live, which I started using a couple years ago. And so then once I discovered that these sort of more like creative uses of the software is possible with the program that I was using, I reached out to Bill, who's this amazing coder, builds microphones, does all sorts of stuff. I reached out to folks like Nate, who's helping me with the presets and the sound design, and a designer named Rostin Wu. And we started saying, okay, let's do this project where we're going to start making these tools. And I knew from the start that in addition to thinking, say, about what would an Arabic synthesizer sound like, or like a really handmade drum machine sound like, I wanted the entire user interface experience to be kind of interesting. And so here is an example of, I'll play a song later, but here's an example of a synthesizer we have. It's called Bayati. And there are 4 synthesizers in the Sufi plugins. And the idea is that they're all hardwired to various maqams. And maqam it's kind of like, for Arabic music, North African music, it's loosely like the equivalent of a scale, but there's this whole other different history. It's like a scale and a relationship of notes, and even kind of like an emotional state you'd be in when you play it. But so you can choose, and you can only play these various scales. So this one right now is set to Homasi, and it has certain quarter tones built into it. And as you can see, the synthesizer is very clearly labeled, attack, decay, sustain, release, everything, except that it's written in the Berber script of Tifinagh. A lot of this is also an homage to Morocco and to Moroccan musicians, and so this is a language that's commonly used. About a third of the population speaks Berber, and this is what it looks like. This sort of crazy, interesting sci-fi, ancient language, but then also very futuristic. And so that's the whole vibe of the Sufi plugins. And here's an example of, this is a drum machine we have. This is something called palmas. You can adjust the number of hands clapping, the speed with they're clapping, the width, whether or not it's like applause, like scattered and staggered, or everybody clapping all at once, sort of Teutonic version. And in addition to wanting to have a very specific and beautiful interface, I'm also quite interested in this idea that it's meant to be like a kind of a total experience, as it will. And so for several of these, we've done instructional videos, but the instructional videos are more like this, ideas for how they're not necessarily, I'll just let you watch. This is for a drone. One of them is a drone machine, 4 different oscillators. You can put in an input, a bunch of filter banks, and this is the video. We'll just play a little example of it, and all the audio is generated by the drone. So that's something we filmed in Casablanca in the morning, really early in the morning, the mist. This is right by the Atlantic. And so here, actually we should stop this, right? So yeah, let's play. And so what there are, as I said, so there's 7 different synthesizers. Oh, and another aspect I nearly forgot is that in addition to having the interface being written entirely in Tifinagh, which encourages hopefully people to use their ears and to experiment and to really sort of like have a more playful interaction rather than the direct, like this functionality. Functionality is a bit muted on this. But so all the rollover texts are fragments of poetry, fragments of Sufi poetry. Sunshine proves its own existence is this one. Any volume of the classics to be brought, and actually I wish a bit of Americana poetry. And so the idea is trying to think a bit more broadly about what software could be and what sort of values are encoded in software and what certain bits of synthesizers or drum machine kits, like almost like how they program you. And so overall, Sufi plugins are a response to that and trying to pushing against of certain types of presets by effectively putting in our own. And so this is a quick, when you download them, it's an ALP file which opens up to this demo track, which I'll play really quickly, and then we can just if you have any questions, we can talk about that. So you get to hear them all in action. So yeah, and there's 4 different synthesizers. There is something called Palmas, the clapping drum machine. There's the drone, which I mentioned. And then there's also kind of the most conceptual one is a plugin called Devotion. And the idea is I was staying at the house of a muezzin, a guy who does the call to prayer in South Morocco for a week because his son was this amazing musician. And it was so interesting because the father would twice a day, he'd go and do the call to prayer, and but he wouldn't listen to his son's music. For religious reasons. And this was at the time when I was working on these plugins, and I was like, is it possible to make a plugin to address this situation? The father and the son and this whole thing, like responding to this environment. And so I came up with Devotion. And so the idea is you set your location on the world map. You set your time zone, and then it will 5 times a day during the call to prayer, it will lower the volume of your computer, lower the volume of Live's output. Except that they're presets. And so the preset levels are observant, fervent, agnostic, apostate, and devout. Atheism is not an option. So yeah, so here we go. But here's this demo just has the synths and the clapping drum machine. The Saba synthesizer, and each one you can select between 4 different maqams: Sabati, Bayati, Khamasi. And they're, if you just Google Sufi plugins, they'll come right up. Any questions? And actually, for the Macs people out there, the great thing, they're all totally open. So you can go in and reprogram and change them around as you see fit. Yeah, the fonts is actually we worked with this amazing designer, this guy Rostin Wu, out in Los Angeles, and put him through hell for it. I want to show the photo of where we got the translations done because that's kind of amazing. This place in Morocco called the Royal Institute for Amazigh Culture. So it's another sort of sci-fi looking building. So yeah, so I went there and explained the project, and they were like, okay. And so then I brought them all these words, you know, like here's, yeah, like so it's French to Berber to all. So yeah, there's this synthesizer glossary, but ultimately the design is it's, you know, JPEG. In the end, it's JPEG images just mapped to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, maybe also if you're interested, where is it? It's going to be here. These. Yeah. These shapes I had to also. This isn't what it looks like. I wasn't able to get the shapes to save with the object, so they're laid on top of a button object. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff to get around limitations.
Yeah, but it's really important since the whole thing, I mean, it's somewhere between, on the one hand, a tool, and on the other hand, like an art piece that you can engage with. So obviously, like the look and feel was kind of foremost on our. Cool. Shoot.
Yeah.
What's your background in like writing this kind of thing for Max for Live?
Well, I've actually come from pre-Max for Live. I don't really know Live that well at all. I kind of lean on Jace for that. I'm mostly a Max. I was with Max way back when it was just MIDI, and then MSP when that came along. And I actually built this really ham-fisted version of what is now Live. You know, just basically a way of you know, having loops. I had a patch that I performed with and all that, and then I just kind of left it alone. And then when I saw when Max for Live came out, I got very excited because so many of the sequencing problems were solved, and easy ways of you know, having libraries of things I would normally have to build a whole patch just to organize. So I was really excited about it. So is that what was your question?
I was just like wondering, like, because you're very much on the technical side and Jason's more like on the musical side. Like,
Right, right.
How you guys work together? Like, how long did it take, like, from the concept to
Yeah, it was a journey. I would say, well, what, a year?
Probably, yeah.
A year, but I mean, that's not like a year of 8-hour days, you know. That's like throwing stuff back and forth, you know, riffing ideas.
And it's funny, the first project that we worked on together was this crazy installation I was doing out in the Netherlands, which involved playing back this archive of incredibly boring Dutch music, a cappellas recorded in people's homes. They would like over the past 30 years, but then modulating it with all sorts of like real-time financial data from the region. So it was like this crazy, you get these voices, but then suddenly I'd get all like glitched out and whatever, and it was like on.
Because somebody's buying pigs.
Yeah, exactly. All related to the pig farming industry there. So once I figured, like, once Bill could like hang throughout this whole crazy process, I was like, okay, let's take this up a level. Oh, next is actually, I'm really interested in making VST versions of these. Like, again, like one of it, I was like just traveling all over, like seeing kids in Egypt using Fruity Loops and seeing kids in Morocco using Cubase and all this. I'm like, on the one hand, it's like software presets travel really far, you know, but then VST would just give a compatibility, like in parts of Africa, Latin America, the Middle East that I'm interested in working with. And I'm also interested in like, I mean, these are obviously very like sort of specific and personal tools, but I kind of want to take it up a level. Like I was in Egypt for a week a couple months ago, and kids making amazing music, and I was like, maybe the next like version 2 will be VSTs, but version 3 will be making really specific tools for like individuals. Like you, this one producer, like what can you not do, and like kind of like taking requests. Right, thanks. Thank you, Hank.